Welcome to Candid Conversation. Today we're in 1 Timothy chapter 5. I picked verses 13 through 15 because these are verses you'll never hear a sermon on. It says, and this is talking about widows. The context is widows. Their husbands have died. And it says, so here they are by themselves. It says, 1 Timothy 5, 13 through 15, and with all they learn to be idle, wandering about from house to house, and not only idle, but tattlers also, and busybodies, speaking things which they ought not. I will therefore that the younger women marry, bear children, guide the house, give none occasion to the adversary to speak reproachfully. For some are already turned aside after Satan. A lot of times when we look at society, we think of the men as being the ones who do the worst crimes. They're the ones usually if someone kills a whole bunch of people or rapes a whole bunch of people or all these major crimes that people get the death penalty for, it's always men. And the reason is because God made men and women differently. The mind, not just the bodies, obviously the bodies are different, but the minds are different too. And men look at things more in a overall summary type level. The man's mind is good for managing a broad spectrum of things. The woman's mind is very detail oriented. She's good at making sure all the details are done. That's why you have here, I would that the younger women marry, bear children, guide the house. Because in the house there's a lot of details to take care of. Washing clothes, cooking food, washing dishes, making beds, picking out the couch and the colors of the wall, the paint on the walls, and the colors of the curtains, and the style of who knows what. There's all these details, and a woman's mind is good at the details, and a man's mind is just good at summary level stuff. So here's a case of a woman who is married, and what Paul says is the younger women, which in the context means women under 60. They are to get married, again, bear children, guide the house. And you say, why? Well, same reason men should get married as well, because when you don't have the check of the opposite sex in your life at all times, then you're subject to deviant behavior. Because all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. There is none good, no, not one. And true, after we're saved, we have the mind of Christ. And you can have Christ live in you. But practically speaking, without the check of the opposite sex there to keep that sin nature of yours in check, and this goes for men, it goes for women as well, then you're going to go against God. And there's another scripture that talks about how when they wax, they are to get married because they will wax wanton against Christ. They're in Christ, but practically speaking, they still have their vile flesh. They still have their sin nature. And a lot of times we don't think of the women like this, but especially you look at, remember women, they live 5 years longer on average than men. When you look at nursing homes, it's usually women who are in those homes. The men usually have died off already in this, so it's the woman who spends the last 5 years of her life in the home. And the problem, and we don't look at the woman's sin, the way the woman's sin nature manifests itself is different than the man's sin nature. The man, what he does in his sin nature he destroys society in violent ways. The woman destroys society in subtle ways. That's why Satan, it said in Genesis 3, was more subtle than any beast of the field. And so that's why he went to the woman and got the woman to sin rather than going to the man, because he knew he could deceive the woman into sinning. Whereas Adam, his mind would say, oh, that's a trick. He wouldn't fall for that. The woman would, he wouldn't. And without the check of the man being there, the woman will go after her sin nature. Now, she's not going to be killing a bunch of people, raping a bunch of people, stealing a bunch of stuff. She's not going to do any crime that you would lock her up for. I mean, the society locks her up for. But the damage that she does is just as bad. Because it says what happens is, when these younger widows don't get married and bear children and guide the house, well, now they've got to occupy their time in different ways. And so it says that gotta get the verse here. They are idle, they are tattlers, they are busybodies, speaking things which they ought not. And he says in 1 Timothy 5:15 that they are already turned aside after Satan. And really, Satan, that's the danger of what Satan did. You know, he went to Eve, he didn't say, why don't you murder your husband? Why don't you do all these awful, terrible things? Because she would say, oh, no, I'm not going to do that. That's bad. That's not what God would want me to do. But she would go around being a tattler, a busybody, speaking things which she ought not, and wouldn't notice that that's a sin. Just like men will do things. Now, the men can see that the woman in doing those things is sinning. And he can help keep her sin nature in check. Just like the woman can see that the man sins in his things. But because the man sins in violent ways, while the woman sins in subtle ways, then the women don't get locked up. And what we've seen through our society today, like the COVID, when that came out, and the responses to COVID, that would never happen in a society ruled by men. Because men would look at it and say, germs, we got an immune system. Our body fights off the flu every year, fights off viruses going around. Well, here's just another virus, and our body will fight it off. I mean, sure, there will be people who get sick and they'll die, but it's better that, man being the financial type thinking will say it's better that we just continue going. We got to keep, we got to keep paying the bills. We got to mortgage to pay, we got clothes to buy, we got food to eat, we got these, and so we just got to keep going. If we get sick, we get sick, then we take time off, but other than that, we got to keep society functioning normally. But the woman, she looks at it in terms of, let's make sure that nobody gets sick, let's make sure that everybody is safe. That's one of the reasons why women live longer than men, is that they don't take chances like men do. And so accidental deaths, by and large, are men who die, because men are more likely to do stupid things, whereas the women tend to be more cautious. And so the reaction to the COVID was, let's shut the entire economy down. Let's make sure everybody wears a mask. We don't want anybody getting it. They didn't think of it logically in terms of, well, it's a virus and it's sickness, and sure, people are going to get sick, people are going to die, but we just got to build up herd immunity. We've got to, no, see, they don't do that. Women think differently than men, and they want to make sure everybody's safe. That's why it says here that I would that the younger women married bear children, guide the house, because the children are the most vulnerable members of our society. So they need more protection, and they need somebody in that making sure in the details of life that everything is done fine, or else they'll end up burning themselves with hot water or something on the stove, or they'll they'll cut themselves with a sharp knife, or a lot of the accidents that that would happen with children are avoided because their mothers are around to make sure that doesn't happen. But with our breakdown of society, you don't have men and women getting married, bearing 2 or 3 children, and staying together the rest of their lives. And so the sin natures of both go unchecked. And you can see with the men that you see here about these killings and riots and things going on. Well, mainly that's men who would do that type of stuff. And so you see that type of crime going up as people get away from God. But what's not talked about is the type of crime that women do, which isn't the type that you lock them up in, but it's all this gossiping and tattling and going behind people's backs and saying things that, because they're so involved, women's mind is so involved with the details that's going on, that when something happens, you look at a man, for example. If a man looks at another man funny in a weird way, you don't notice it. If there's some snide comment that a man gives to another man, he's oblivious to it. Or if he does notice those things, he's just going to brush it off. It's no big deal. He's like, it's just, okay, well, that's fine. That person didn't like what I did there. Hey, I'm not perfect, so, okay. And then you just move on. You laugh it off, you move on. But women will dwell on these things because they are detail-oriented. Every detail to a woman is important. A man, it's just a summary type thing. So things are going to go wrong here and there. Men understand that, and then when that happens, it's okay. We just move on to the next thing, but the women, because they're so detail-oriented, they try to make everything to perfect, just right. And so then the woman gets upset. Oh, I didn't like the tone of her voice. I didn't like how he looked at me. I didn't like what that person did in that situation. And so then they got to go tell. Can you believe so-and-so said this to me? See, if a man did that, man comes up to another man, says, oh, Bill said this to me. The other man saying, so? Okay, so he said that to you. Let's move on. But for the woman, it's, oh, really? Really? She said that? Oh, I can't believe she said that. Oh, she's just such a snide, devious, evil person, And so that's where this, like he says here, they are naturally, or they're not natural, they're idle. It says, with all, they learn to be idle, wandering about from house to house, and not only idle, but tattlers also, and busybodies, speaking things which they ought not. So that's where all the gossip comes. The woman tells the other woman, it tells the other woman, it tells the other woman. They go from house to house. They're not going to find a compassionate ear with the husband. I tell the husband, so-and-so gave me a certain look. I can't believe that. And you're thinking, well, I don't care. That didn't bother me. Why should it bother you? So they looked at you differently. Maybe there's a good reason for that. Maybe they were stressed out over a situation that happened before they saw you, and it has nothing to do with you. Or if it does have something to do with you, there's nothing you can do about it anyway. It's their problem. See, if they're the ones that are mad at me, who's got the problem? It's not me. They're the ones mad at me, so they have the problem. And if I then let it upset me, well, now I've got the problem. So a man would just say, well, okay, they're upset with me, big deal, move on. They'll get over it, or if they don't get over it, then, I'm better off without them anyway, because they need to be loving and understand that nobody's perfect and that I had good intentions, and so I just move on. Who cares? But if the woman dwells on it, well, now it's not just the person's problem who has a problem with her. Now it becomes her problem. Then she goes tells somebody else, and now that other person thinks badly of the first person. And then that person tells somebody else, and now that person thinks badly of it. So with the men, somebody does something bad against them, well, that's just the end of it right there. But for the women, somebody does something bad against them, all the women in there that they know about this. And so now the reputation of whoever it is sullied, not just from one person, but by a whole host of people. And they take things personally. They take things emotionally speaking. Instead of thinking that there's instead of looking at it in a logical way in terms of, why did that person say that? Well, it seems like it's because of the situation they're in. No, they don't just look at the situation and say, like they say, oh, well, we need to get the grass mowed, let's say. Let's say that's what the person said. Well, to a man, that means, oh, the grass must be too high, so I need to get that grass mowed. But to a woman, it's, oh, you're saying I'm lazy, that I didn't get out there in time, or everything's not up to your standard. There's emotionalism involved. The woman doesn't look at the reason in terms of a natural thing, as in terms of problem, grass is high, solution, mow the grass. They think of it in terms of, well, how exactly did they phrase that the grass needs to be mowed? What was the tone of voice in that? It sounds like they were implying that I don't get things done, that I just sit around and watch TV all day. And so it's really a personal attack against me for them saying that the grass is too high, that I'm not taking care of the house like I should. And so I'm going to show them. You see, a woman makes something, she looks at the details, she looks at it from an emotional standpoint, and then she, instead of just, maybe that is why the thing was said. Maybe it is because the person says that they're lazy. I don't know. But either way, if the man goes out and says, okay, you tell him the grass is too high, then what he does is he goes and mows the grass. So then the problem is solved. But the woman thinks, oh, well, they're attacking me, saying that I'm lazy, or I didn't do a good job mowing the grass, or whatever. And so now it's going to go a step further. And so the problem doesn't get resolved because she's not going to go mow the grass. She's got to go talk it out with that person and say, well, why exactly did you say that? Or if she's afraid of confronting that other person, then she'll go around going around telling other people. And before you know it, the whole neighborhood thinks the person is a slave driver because they made the comment that the grass needs to be mowed. Maybe it's just because there was a whole lot of rain and it had nothing to do with being lazy, or maybe that the lawnmower was broken, or maybe they were out of gas, or maybe they didn't have the money to pay for somebody to get it mowed. I don't know. There are all kinds of reasons why, but if the woman automatically thinks it's an attack against her, and then she goes tells everybody else, now the whole neighborhood is against that person who made that comment, and all the women are against him. So then every woman in each house tells her husband how bad that person is by making that comment, and now the men are against him because the man's going to take the woman's side. He doesn't hear the whole story of the comment and why it was made. And so that's why it says here that they are turned aside after Satan. The gossiping, the idle talkers, the busybodies, what that does is it destroys society. It's not in a way that we lock people up like the murderers and those things, because it's not seen immediately. If I'm a murderer, I go out and murder people, well, then you lock me up. It's obvious. I murdered 10 people. Well, 10 people aren't here because I murdered them. That's real easy to see. Therefore, we lock them up, or we give them the death penalty or something so that they don't go murder number 11, 12, 13, 14. But with the woman, if she's the one spreading gossip and idle talking and busybodies, then it goes to another person, which goes to another person, which goes to another person, which goes to the husbands of the women. And now the whole neighborhood is mad at each other over things. Where I am, I'm in this homeowners association, very small. But there are people there, and there are women. The men don't do this, but the women have nothing better to do than to talk about so-and-so neighbor. I'm not going to pay my dues because such and such neighbor doesn't mow the grass, or they've got an RV out there, or they've got a basketball hoop out in the front, or they don't take their trash and put it back, or they don't edge the grass in their yard, or whatever it is, and now they're all upset about that. Then they go tell the other woman, she tells the other woman, she tells the other woman, and now the whole neighborhood is upset with this one house for... And who knows what reason. Maybe the person didn't have the money to pay for it and they're physically unable to get out there, or they're just stuck with this RV that broke down on them and they can't get anybody to take it away, or whatever. I don't know the reasoning. But what I do know is the women went around and gossiped and were busybodies and tattletailers, and what they did was they destroyed the whole neighborhood by their speech. And so basically Paul is saying, and no one will talk about this because then the women get upset about this and then they don't want to come to the church anymore. So, but I'm not supported by this. If you don't want to send me any money or watch me again, I mean, I would rather you watch and be edified with sound doctrine, but if you don't, that's fine. That's your decision. So and that's why I wanted to focus on these verses, so you know what they say. For women, they need to have things to do in terms of raising children, taking care of the house, or taking care of parents. We talked about that in 1 Corinthians 11 in our Bible study. They need to be doing stuff like that so that they don't use their time if they look at the details of their own lives, they can fix it. But if they look at the details of other people's lives, then they go telling other people about how bad so-and-so is, or what they said, or the bad look that they gave. And the result is they've turned aside after the devil. And it's so subtle that we don't even notice it. And so Paul warns against that. He says, you can support widows who are over 60 years old because of the stage of life that they're in. They're not going to do these things. But if they're under that, they need to get married, bear children, guide the house. Or else they're going to be trying to control other people's lives, and then they're just going to destroy the society around them. And there's no better example of that than to see how our society reacted to COVID, and how our economy was destroyed and the morals of our society have gone down due to the COVID response. Largely, it's a woman's response, not a man's response. Thanks for watching.